When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. I remember that moment so clearly. The way the afternoon sun was falling through the kitchen window, catching the dust motes floating in the air. They looked like tiny, golden stars. I was stirring a pot of soup on the stove, the one my David always loved, the one with the little bits of celery. And she just walked in and said it. No warning. No soft voice. Just the words, flat and hard like stones dropping onto the kitchen floor. Mom, she said, we need you to go. This isn't working. My mother needs the room now. I didn't turn around at first. I just kept stirring that soup, watching the little swirls I was making. I could feel the heat from the pot on my face. And I smiled. I smiled because if I had turned around, if I had let her see my face, I would have crumbled into a million pieces right there on that linoleum floor. I smiled to hold myself together. I smiled because I was so tired of fighting. For this family. For my place in it. For the memory of my son. I smiled because I had nowhere else to go, and admitting that out loud felt like a death. And in that silence, with the soup bubbling and the dust floating, my mind didn't go to the anger. It didn't go to the hurt of her words. It went back. Way back. It went to a summer evening, maybe 35 years ago. I was sitting on the porch swing with my husband, Frank. The kids were playing in the front yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. It was Mary, our daughter, and David, our son. They were maybe 10 and 8. David was trying to teach Mary how to catch a firefly without squeezing it. And Frank, he put his arm around me, pulled me close, and he whispered something I have never forgotten. He said, one day, when I'm gone, this house, this whole life we built, it all goes to our girl. Mary. She'll carry it on. She has your gentle heart. He meant Mary. He always meant Mary, but life doesn't always listen to our plans. Does it? It has a way of scribbling its own story, right over the words we write so carefully. Frank, my husband, he was a good man. A quiet man. He worked for the Postal Service for 37 years. He'd come home with his uniform smelling of rain and leather, and he'd always have a piece of candy in his pocket for the kids. Mary was his shadow. She was our first, born after 2 miscarriages that left me afraid to hope. When she finally came, tiny and red-faced and screaming, Frank just held her and cried. He said she was his miracle. And David, he came 3 years later. He was all energy, all scraped knees and loud laughter. He was mine. My little firecracker. We weren't rich. Not by a long shot. But that little house on Beechwood Street, it was everything. I kept it spotless. I had my rose bushes by the front steps, the ones Frank grumbled about pruning but secretly loved. I'd hang the laundry out back on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the sheets would smell so clean, like sunshine and soap. Even now, when I'm somewhere else, a certain smell can take me right back to that backyard. The smell of cut grass, or Frank's barbecue smoke, or the lilacs that grew by the fence. We raised the kids with simple rules. Be kind. Say please and thank you. Help your neighbor. And family comes first. Always. That was the big one. Family. We ate dinner together every night at 5:30. Meatloaf on Mondays. Pot roast on Sundays. We'd go to church on Sunday mornings, and Frank would fall asleep during the sermon, and I'd have to nudge him with my elbow. Mary would giggle into her hymn book. David would be drawing spaceships on the donation envelope. Those were the years you think will last forever. The years of school plays and parent-teacher conferences, of skin knees and first heartbreaks. I remember Mary's first dance. She wore a pink dress with puffy sleeves, and Frank was so nervous waiting for her to come downstairs that he paced a hole in the living room rug. And David, when he learned to ride his bike without training wheels, he rode it right into the side of the garage because he forgot how to use the brakes. We laughed about that for years. We laughed about everything back then. Then Frank got sick. It started as a cough. A little thing we didn't think much of. But it didn't go away. By the time the doctors figured it out, it was everywhere. In his lungs, in his bones. I watched the strongest man I ever knew shrink. I watched his uniforms hang loose on him, then get packed away in a box in the attic. I watched the light go out of his eyes, the same eyes that had looked at me with so much love on our wedding day 30 years before. Mary was 24 then, living in another state with a job she loved. She came home as often as she could. She'd sit with Frank for hours, reading to him from the newspaper, holding his hand. He'd just look at her, his miracle, with so much love and sadness. David was 21, still figuring things out. He moved back in to help me. He'd help me lift Frank, help me get him to the bathroom, sit with him at night, so I could sleep for a few hours. He was so strong, my boy. But I could see it was breaking him, too. Watching his hero fade point one night, near the end, Frank was more lucid than he'd been in weeks. He motioned for me to come close. His voice was just a whisper, rough as sandpaper. He said, "The house. Mary, you remember? You'll make sure she gets it? She'll take care of you. She'll keep the family here." I squeezed his hand. "I remember, Frank," I whispered back. "Don't you worry. I remember." He closed his eyes, and a little peace settled on his face. He passed 2 days later. The house felt so empty after he was gone. So quiet. I'd walk from room to room, just touching things. The back of the sofa, where he used to sit. The coffee mug he always used, still sitting in the cabinet. I didn't have the heart to move it. After the funeral, after the casseroles stopped coming, and the relative went home, I was alone. Just me and the quiet. Mary flew back to her job, promising to call every day. David stayed. He said he didn't want me to be by myself. He got a job at a local hardware store. We fell into a routine. I'd make him breakfast, pack him a lunch. He'd come home, we'd eat dinner together. Maybe watch some television. It was a comfort having him there. He filled some of the silence Frank left behind. Then he met Lisa. She came into the hardware store where he worked, looking for a specific kind of paint for a little table she was refinishing. David didn't know anything about paint, but he sure knew how to talk to a pretty girl. He came home that night and told me all about her. "Ma, she has the nicest smile. And she restores old furniture. Can you imagine? Turning trash into treasure." I was happy for him. So happy. He deserved some joy. Lisa was different. She was sharp, ambitious. She had plans. Big plans. She didn't grow up in a house like ours, with meatloaf on Mondays and pot roast on Sundays. Her family was smaller, quieter, more private. I could tell from the first time I met her at a little diner for lunch that she found us the lot. Too much, maybe. She smiled politely at my stories. She ate her salad without much enthusiasm. But she looked at David like he hung the moon. And that was enough for me. If she loved my boy, I would love her. They got married a year later. A small wedding in our backyard, under the string lights I borrowed from the church. It was beautiful. Frank's rose bushes were in full bloom. Mary came home for it, and it was the first time since Frank died that the house felt full again, full of laughter and hope. It felt like a new beginning. And when David and Lisa talked about their future, about saving up for a house of their own, it felt right. It felt like the natural order of things. Life moving on, and then came the baby. Little Tommy. The moment I held him in my arms, a whole new part of my heart opened up. Part one didn't even know was there. He smelled like milk and hope. He had Frank's eyes, that same shade of blue. Being a grandmother, it was like being a mother, but without all the worry, just the joy. I would watch him for hours while David and Lisa worked. I'd rock him to sleep, sing him the same lullabies I sang to Mary and David. I'd take him for walks in the stroller and point out the squirrels, the flowers, the big trucks that went by. He was my little sunshine. It became natural for them to spend more and more time at my house. It was bigger than their little apartment, and it had the big fenced-in backyard. We'd have Sunday dinners again, just like the old days. Lisa would help me in the kitchen, though she wasn't much of a cook. She'd chop vegetables too slowly or stir things the wrong way, but I didn't mind. I was just happy to have the noise, the life, back in the house. The sound of little Tommy babbling in his high chair. The sound of David laughing at something on TV. It filled the emptiness Frank had left behind. Sometimes, I'd catch myself thinking about Frank's words. The house goes to Mary. And a little worry would prick at me. But then I'd look at David, at his family, at how happy they were here, and I'd push the thought away. Frank would understand, I told myself. He'd see how much this family needs this home. This is where the roots are. Mary has her own life, her own path. She's not here. David is. It made a different kind of sense now. The house wasn't just a building anymore. It was Tommy's home, too. It was their anchor. I'd talk to Mary on the phone every Sunday. I'd tell her about Tommy's latest word, about the funny thing the dog next door did, about how I'd made her grandmother's apple pie recipe. She'd listen, her voice always a little far away, and she'd say, "That's nice, Ma. That's really nice." She rarely came home. Her job was demanding. Her life was there. And a small, selfish part of me was glad she wasn't here to see how much things had changed. To see that this house, the one her father promised her, was now filled with another family's life. When David and Lisa started talking about selling their apartment and moving in with me, it just made sense. They said it was temporary, just for a year or two, to save up a real down payment for a house of their own. They'd pay me a little rent, help with the bills, help me out around the house.
It would be a favor to me, they said.
So I wouldn't be alone. I said yes. Of course I said yes. It was my family. They moved in. Tommy's toys took over the living room. David's tools filled up the garage. Lisa rearranged my kitchen cabinets so the plates were in a different place to make more sense. I came in one morning to make my coffee and couldn't find a mug. I stood there with the cabinet door open, and for a second, I felt like a guest in my own home. But I pushed it down. I told myself this is how families work. You adjust. You bend. The first year was okay. A little crowded, but okay. We had our routines. Lisa worked long hours. David did odd jobs around the house, fixing the leaky faucet, patching a hole in the screen door. I was the one with Tommy most of the time.
I didn't mind.
I loved it. I taught him how to stack blocks, how to turn the pages of a book without ripping them, how to say please and thank you. He called me Gamma. It was the sweetest sound in the world. But slowly, over the second year, the air in the house started to change. It was small things at first. Lisa would come home from work and barely say hello, just go straight to her room. If I left a spoon on the counter, she'd put it in the dishwasher with a little sigh, like I was a child she had to clean up after. If I talked to David for too long in the evening, she'd find a reason to interrupt. "Honey, can you come look at this? David, Tommy needs you." I started to feel like I was in the way. One evening, I was telling David about a funny thing that happened at the grocery store. An old friend from church, we'd bumped into each other, talked for 20 minutes, forgot our frozen peas in the cart. I was laughing, and David was smiling, when Lisa came to the doorway. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, her arms crossed, looking at us. The look on her face, it was cold. Like I was doing something wrong, stealing her husband's attention. The laughter just died in my throat. I made an excuse and went to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed, in the room I'd shared with Frank for 30 years, and I felt like an intruder. Things with Mary became strained, too. She'd call, and I'd tell her about Tommy, about the house, and I'd hear this change in her voice. A tightness. A distance. One Sunday, she said, "Ma, it sounds like they've taken over the place. It sounds like David's house now." I tried to laugh it off. "Don't be silly, Mary. It's just for a little while. We're all just helping each other out." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Dad promised me that house. You know that, right?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was sad, and it cut right through me. I didn't know what to say. I had promised Frank, too. But here, in the middle of all this life, it felt impossible. "Mary," I finally said, "your father wouldn't want us to be divided. He'd want us to be a family."
She sighed.
"Is it a family, Ma? Or is it just them using you?" I got a little defensive then. I told her she didn't understand because she wasn't here. She didn't see how much they needed me. The conversation ended coolly. We said, "I love you," but it felt like words without the feeling behind them. I hung up the phone and looked around the living room. Tommy's blocks were scattered on the rug. David's jacket was thrown over a chair. A half-empty coffee cup, Lisa's, was on the end table, leaving a ring on the wood. A ring I'd have to clean up. It felt like a small rebellion, leaving that ring there, like she was marking her territory. I got a cloth and wiped it away, my hand trembling a little. I didn't know who I was in this house anymore. Was I the mother? The grandmother? Or just the helpful old lady who happened to own the roof over their heads? The turning point, the real one, came without any warning, just like everything else. It was a Tuesday. David came home from work early, his face pale. He sat me down at the kitchen table. "Ma," he said, his voice shaking. "I have to tell you something. I lost my job. The company is closing down the whole store. They're all gone." My heart sank for him. I reached across the table and held his hand. "Oh, honey,
I'm so sorry.
we'll figure it out. We always do." Lisa came home later. She didn't look surprised. They must have talked about it already.
They sat at the table with me.
And Lisa took over the conversation. "We've been thinking," she said, her voice calm and businesslike.
This is a sign.
"It's time for us to make a change. We can't afford an apartment on one salary, and we don't want to move to some tiny, bad neighborhood." She paused and looked at me, not with warmth, but with calculation. "We need to think about Tommy. He needs a stable home, a yard to play in. He needs to stay here." I nodded slowly. "Of course, Tommy needs stability. You can stay here as long as you need to. There's no rent for a while. We're family. We take care of each other." David looked relieved, grateful. He squeezed my hand.
Thanks, Ma.
"I don't know what we'd do without you." But Lisa wasn't finished. She leaned forward. "That's just it. This isn't a long-term solution. We need a permanent one. We've been talking, and we think we should buy this house from you." The words hung in the air. Buy the house. My house. Frank's house. The house where I'd hung my wedding dress in the closet for 50 years. Where I'd brought both my babies home from the hospital. Where every nick in the floorboards held a memory. "Buy it," I whispered. "But it's my home. It's all I have." Lisa's eyes were steady. "We know. And we take good care of it. You could still live here, of course. You'd have your room. But the house would be in our name. It would be our asset. It would give us the security we need. David's unemployment won't last forever. We need to think about our future." I looked at David. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the table, his jaw tight. He knew. He knew what this meant. "David," I asked, my voice small, "is this what you want?" He finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Ma, I don't know what else to do. We're scared. We're just trying to protect our family. Tommy's family." He said, "Our family," like I wasn't standing right there. Like I was at the very root of that family. I couldn't answer. I just got up from the table, my legs feeling like they were made of water. I walked to my room and closed the door. I sat on the bed in the dark, and for the first time since Frank died, I felt completely, utterly alone. And for the first time, I felt afraid. Afraid of my own son. Afraid of his wife. Afraid of losing everything. That I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, going over every memory, every promise. When the first gray light of dawn crept into the room, I knew what I had to do. I had to call Mary. I had to tell her. I had to finally admit that her father's promise, my promise, was being broken right in front of me. My hand was shaking so badly, I could barely dial the number. It rang.
And rang.
And then her voice, groggy with sleep. "Hello." "Mary," I said. And then my voice just broke. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears I'd been holding back for weeks, for months, just came flooding out. I cried like a baby, ugly crying, into the phone.
Ma?
"Ma, what is it? What's wrong?" Her voice was sharp with fear. I told her everything. About David losing
His job.
About Lisa's calm, cold demand to buy the house. About the way David wouldn't look at me. About how I felt like a stranger in my own home. About how scared I was. I told her about the coffee cup ring, about the rearranged cabinets, about the looks Lisa gave me. I poured out 2 years of silent hurt into that phone call. Mary listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finally stopped, my voice hoarse and my face wet with tears, the line was quiet for a long time. I thought maybe she'd hung up. Then I heard her take a deep breath. "Ma," she said, and her voice was different. It was hard, like steel wrapped in velvet. "I'm coming home. I'm booking a flight today. And I'm bringing Dad's will. My blood ran cold. Frank's will. It was a simple thing, drawn up by a lawyer in town years ago. I had a copy somewhere in the old filing cabinet in the basement. I'd looked at it once after he died, and then put it away. It was straightforward. Everything to me, his wife. But it also had a separate, handwritten note. Not legal, just a letter. It was addressed to me and the kids. In it, he'd written about his wishes. About the house. About Mary. He'd written, "My dearest wish is that our family home, 42 Beechwood Street, remains a place of love and comfort. I leave it in your hands, my love, with the hope that one day it will pass to our daughter, Mary. She has the roots here, the history. She will honor it." He'd given a copy to Mary years ago, when she turned 21. Mary, wait, I pleaded. Let's not make this a war.
He's your brother.
He's just scared. He's scared. Mary's voice was sharp. He's scared? He's trying to take our mother's home out from under her, and he's scared?
No, ma.
This isn't about being scared. This is about Lisa. This is about them seeing a paycheck. I'm not going to let Dad's last wish be trampled on because they made bad decisions. Mary arrived 2 days later. I was at the window when the taxi pulled up, but I saw her get out. Saw her look up at the house, her face unreadable. She looked different, older, more like Frank. She had that same steady, quiet strength in her eyes. When she walked in, the house felt different.
The air changed.
David was at work looking for a new job. Lisa was home with Tommy. She was in the living room, and she stood up when Mary walked in, a practiced smile on her face. "Mary, what a wonderful surprise," Lisa said, her voice too bright. "We didn't know you were coming. David will be so happy." Mary just looked at her. She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. She just put her briefcase down on the coffee table, right on top of one of Lisa's magazines. "I'm sure he will," Mary said quietly. "We have a lot to talk about." That evening, after David came home, we all sat in the living room. It felt like a courtroom. Mary, calm and still. David, fidgeting and nervous. Lisa, defensive, her arms crossed tight over her chest. Tommy was in his room, watching cartoons, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing downstairs. Mary started. She spoke in a low, even voice. She told them about Dad's letter. She told them about his wish. She told them that the house was never meant to be sold or used as a bargaining chip. It was meant to be a home for me, first and then for her. Lisa let out a sharp laugh. "A letter? A handwritten letter?
That's not a will, Mary.
That's a sentimental piece of paper. The house belongs to your mother. And if she wants to sell it to us, that's her choice." Mary looked at me. The room was silent. All eyes were on me. The weight of it was crushing. My son, looking at me with a mixture of hope and guilt. My daughter, looking at me with love and a quiet plea for me to be strong. My daughter-in-law, looking at me with barely concealed contempt. And Frank's ghost, standing in the corner, watching it all. I opened my mouth. But no words came out. What could I say? How could I choose? If I gave in to David and Lisa, I would break Mary's heart and betray Frank's last wish. If I stood with Mary, I could lose my son and my grandson forever. I felt like I was being torn in two. Finally, David spoke. His voice was quiet, pleading. "Ma, please. Think of Tommy. Think of us. We're your family. We're the ones here, every day. We need this." Lisa jumped in. "Your son needs this. We're not asking for a handout. We're asking to buy it. You'd still live here. Nothing would change."
But we all knew that was a lie.
Everything would change. The power would shift. I would become a guest, a tenant in my own home. I would be at their mercy. Mary stood up. She walked over to the fireplace mantel, where a picture of Frank in his postal uniform sat. She touched the frame gently. "This isn't about money, Lisa. It was never about money. It's about honoring a man's love for his family. A man who worked his whole life for this little piece of the world. He wanted it to be a safe place for Mom. He wanted it to be a place where she would always be cherished and respected. Can you honestly say that's what's happening here?" Her words hung in the air, heavy and true. They echoed my own silent fears. No one spoke. The silence was broken by a small sound. A sniffle. It was David. He had his head in his hands, and his shoulders were shaking. He was crying. Lisa looked at him, her face a mixture of shock and something else, something that might have been feared. David's tears changed something. The hard shell of the argument cracked, just a little. He lifted his head, his face wet. "I'm sorry, Ma," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I've been so scared. I felt like such a failure. Losing my job. I felt like I'd let everyone down. Lisa, she just wanted to fix it. She wanted to make it safe. And I thought this was the answer. But it's not. It's just wrong." He looked at Lisa, a plea in his eyes. "Isn't it, Lisa?
Tell me you feel it."
Tell me this isn't right." Lisa stared at him. For a long moment, I thought she was going to get angry, to lash out. But then, something in her face softened. Just a flicker. She looked around the room. At me, an old woman with tears on her face. At Mary, standing strong by our father's picture. At her husband, broken and ashamed. And she saw, maybe for the first time, what she was doing. The family she was tearing apart. She didn't say she was sorry. Lisa wasn't built that way. But she gave a small, tight nod. She uncrossed her arms. It was a small surrender, but it was enough. The next few days were strange. Quiet. David and I really talked for the first time in years. He told me about the pressure he felt, the pressure Lisa put on him to be more, to have more. He told me he loved me, and he was ashamed of himself. I held him, my boy, and told him it was okay. That fear makes us do crazy things. That love forgives. Lisa kept her distance, but she was less hostile. She started putting the coffee mugs back in the old cabinet. A small thing, but it felt like an apology. Mary stayed for a week. She and I had long talks on the porch swing, just like I used to with Frank. She told me about her life, her job, her own quiet struggles. She wasn't married. She'd had her heart broken a few times. "Maybe Dad's house is what I need," she joked one evening. "A place to come home to." I laughed, but I heard the truth in it. She was lonely, too. We were all just a bunch of lonely people trying to hold on to love in different ways. Before Mary left, we had one last family dinner. I made a pot roast, just like the old Sunday dinners. Lisa actually helped me in the kitchen without being asked. She chopped the carrots the right way this time. David and Mary set the table, bickering playfully about where the forks went, just like when they were kids. Tommy sat in his high chair, banging his spoon, happy because everyone was laughing. It wasn't perfect. The hurt wasn't gone. It was still there, under the surface, a scar that would take a long time to fade. Lisa and I still had a long way to go. But for that one evening, we were a family again. We were eating together in the house that Frank built, and it felt for a little while like he was there with us, smiling. Mary gave me a long hug at the airport. "You're a good woman, Ma," she whispered in my ear. "You held us together." I shook my head. "No, honey, you did. You came home." She smiled. "Take care of the house for me." I promised I would. So, when my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. And now you know the rest of that story. You know why that smile was so heavy. It wasn't just about being asked to leave. It was about everything that led to that moment. All the love, all the fear, all the promises, all the near losses. It was about a family that almost broke. After Mary left, things with Lisa and David didn't magically fix themselves overnight. There was still a fence to mend. Lisa was quieter around me for a while, like she was figuring out how to act. I gave her space. I'd learned that you can't force these things. Love, real love, has to grow back on its own, like grass after a drought. You can water it and give it sun, but you can't make the blades grow faster. David found a new job, not a great one, but a start. It eased some of the pressure. They stopped talking about buying the house. The subject just disappeared. One day, a few months later, Lisa came to me while I was watering my rose bushes. She stood there for a minute just watching. Then she said, "Those are really pretty. I never knew you did all this work on them." I smiled. "Your father-in-law used to grumble about them, but he loved them." She nodded. Then she said something I never expected.
I'm sorry.
For everything.
For how I treated you.
I was scared. And I was wrong. Her voice was awkward, the words stumbling out. But they were real. I reached out and touched her hand. It was the first time I'd ever done that. I know, honey, I said. I know.
We're all scared sometimes.
The important thing is we're still here. We're still a family. She didn't say anything else. She just went inside. But that night, after dinner, she made a pot of tea and brought 2 cups into the living room.
She handed one to me.
We sat there, watching some silly show on television, not saying much. But it was a start. A real start. You know, at my age, you learn that family isn't a straight line. It's a big, messy circle. People leave, they come back, they hurt you, and you hurt them, and if you're lucky, you find a way to forgive. The important thing is to keep the circle from breaking, to hold on to the love, even when it's hard to see through all the anger and fear. I think about Frank a lot, especially on quiet evenings, sitting on the porch.
I talk to him sometimes.
I tell him about Tommy, who's starting school now and is so smart it scares me. I tell him about Mary, how she calls every Sunday without fail. I tell him about David, how he's becoming a good man, a better father. And I tell him about the house, that it's still standing, that it's still a home. I think he'd be proud of us. Not because we're perfect, but because we fought for each other. We chose each other, even when it was hard. Sometimes, I still walk through the house at night, when everyone is asleep. I run my hand over the banister where the kids carved their initials when they were little. I stand in the kitchen and remember 1,000 breakfasts, 1,000 dinners. I look out the window at the backyard where Frank's roses still bloom. And I feel him. I feel the love he poured into every nail, every shingle, every room. This house has held our tears, our laughter, our fights, our forgiveness. It's more than wood and bricks. It's the keeper of our story, S.O. That day in the kitchen, when Lisa told me to leave, I smiled. I smiled because in that one terrible moment, I saw the whole journey. I saw the scared young mother I was, the devoted wife, the grieving widow, the hopeful grandmother. I saw the promise I made to my dying husband and the choice I had to make to keep my family whole. I saw my daughter's strength and my son's shame. I saw my daughter-in-law's fear, hiding behind her cold eyes. I smiled because I knew, in that instant, that I wasn't going anywhere. Not because I was going to fight or scream, but because this was my home. It was Frank's home. It was Mary's home. It was David's home. And it was Tommy's home. And a home doesn't kick you out. It holds you. And I had finally, after all those years of bending and breaking and almost losing everything, found the strength to stand my ground. Not with anger, but with the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I belonged. That I had earned my place here with a lifetime of love. Lisa and I had our real talk later that night, after the soup was eaten and Tommy was in bed. She came to my room and knocked. When she sat on the edge of my bed, she was crying. She told me about her own mother, how cold and distant she was, how she never felt like she belonged anywhere. She said she was jealous of what we had, this messy, loud, loving family, and she didn't know how to be a part of it, so she tried to control it instead. For the first time, I saw her not as the woman trying to take my home, but as a lost girl who just wanted a home of her own. I held her hand, just like I'd held my own children's hands 1,000 times. I told her, "You don't have to control it, honey. You just have to be in it. The mess, the noise, the love. It's all yours. It always has been." We talked for hours that night. We talked about Frank, about David as a little boy, about my own fears of being old and useless. And for the first time, she wasn't my daughter-in-law. She was my daughter. That was the real turning point. Not the argument in the living room, but the quiet surrender in my bedroom. That was when we truly became a family. Not because of blood, but because of understanding. Because of forgiveness. So, if there's a lesson in all of this, it's a simple one. It's not about who owns the house, or who gets what in a will. It's about the love you build inside the 4 walls. It's about being brave enough to say you're sorry, and being strong enough to forgive. It's about holding on, not with a tight fist but with an open heart. Because families break. It's the easiest thing in the world. The hard part, the beautiful part, is putting the pieces back together. And you don't do it with nails and glue. You do it with grace, with patience, and with a love that refuses to let go. I still live in the house on Beechwood Street. Tommy is 10 now. He mows the lawn for me, just like his grandfather used to. David and Lisa are doing well. They finally bought a little house of their own, just a few blocks away. It was important for them to have their own space. And you know who helped them paint the living room?
Mary. She flew in for a weekend.
The three of them, Mary, David, and Lisa, painting and laughing and arguing about the right shade of blue. Frank would have loved it. And on Sunday evenings, they all come here. We fill up this old house with noise and laughter and the smell of my pot roast. Tommy sets the table. David and Lisa bring the wine. Mary calls in on video chat if she can't be here, and we all crowd around my little phone to talk to her. Lisa helps me in the kitchen without being asked. She knows where the spoons are now. She knows where everything is. Because it's her kitchen too. When I look at them, gathered around that table, I don't see the hurt anymore. I see the healing. I see the circle, unbroken. I see Frank in Tommy's eyes. I see my own stubbornness in Mary's determination. I see David's gentle heart, finally at peace. And I see Lisa, not as the woman who told me to leave, but as the daughter who finally came home. And me? I'm just the old woman at the head of the table, the keeper of the stories. The one who smiles when she should cry. The one who learned that sometimes the greatest strength is in the softest places. The one who knows without a doubt that this house, this family, this love, it was all worth fighting for. So, if you're in the middle of your own storm right now, if your family feels like it's breaking apart, hold on.
Just hold on.
Not to the anger, not to the being right. Hold on to the love. Even if it's just a tiny flicker. Fan it. Protect it. Believe that it can grow again. Because it can. I know it can. I've seen it. And maybe, one quiet evening, when you least expect it, the rain will stop. The sun will come out. And you'll find yourself sitting around a table with the people you love most, and you'll realize the storm is over. And you're still here. Together. And that is everything.